Hello lovelies. Yeah, it's about the Gillette advert, and I know everyone's doing this because it's the controversy du jour, but I want to try and go into it a bit more in depth, give you something a bit better than oh my god, what are the SJWs doing now kind of thing. So I'll start with a summary of why I think people are upset, then we'll do an analysis of the video because it's not really that long, and then I'll give you my opinion right at the end. Okay? Right, let's get started. There are a few things that get people as upset as unfairness and hypocrisy, and ironically it's a little bit unfair to get upset with people over hypocrisy, because in order to be a hypocrite you have to try to do the right thing and fail. And the problem here is really one of consistency and fairness and that hypocrisy. So it's not just the hypocrisy, it goes a bit further than that. To understand that, you have to understand that when it comes to men, there is essentially a monoculture of beating down on men. Now people will look historically, but we don't live in the past, we live now, and it is nearly a relentless drumbeat of you're toxic, you're abusers, you're violent, you can't be trusted, you're no good at anything, you know, everything would be better without you, and it's constant. You may not see it that way, a lot of men do, you may dismiss that as male fragility and so on, but that underlines the hypocrisy underneath all of this. It contradicts what you and what this advert is asking for in a lot of ways. Perhaps before I go a little bit more in depth into that, I mean, there is one glaring issue over all of this. This is an advertisement. Gillette are trying to sell you something, right? It's not them doing social activism out of the goodness of their hearts or whatever. They see value in being this way and presenting their product this way, and in the publicity that the inevitable controversy was going to cause. So by me making this video, I am helping them. You are helping them in discussing it. You are helping them in giving them a free pass for what is cynical capitalist exploitation of the market and of the social movements of which you're a part. That kind of hangs over all of this. But leaving that aside, consider what happens when an advert aimed at women, in some way interpreted as critical of women, comes out. The prime example I think we have is the Beachbody Ready advert on the London Tube. What happened? It was roundly condemned by all, it ended up being essentially banned, but all the negative publicity helped the company, Protein World if I remember correctly, and gave them a huge sales boost because people were buying their product out of spite. Yeah, so this kind of controversy marketing works, and that wasn't even an intended controversy. And perhaps most importantly, that wasn't criticizing or doing down femininity or the quality of being a woman. It was just suggesting that in some way you improve yourself. That's not what the Gillette advert does, though that's how some people have been defending and protecting it. But like I say, what happened? Endless articles condemning it. Yeah, endless articles condemning the people who were defending it. It got banned. There was institutional power set up against this, railing against this. And what's happened with the Gillette advert is the exact opposite. Article after article defending it. You know, people with institutional power defending it, saying it's a good thing, despite it condemning men for being men, not for being fat or whatever else. It's a very broad brush swipe against all men. Now there's hypocrisy on both sides here. You need to pick a consistent position and you need to stick to it. Either representation and advertisement and all these things, when they say something bad or can be interpreted as bad, or when they hurt someone's feelings, this is terrible and wrong and shouldn't happen, or it's irrelevant and doesn't matter from the other side. You've got to pick one, or you've got to find a nuanced position between the two that is at least consistent. But if you're going to say that the Beachbody Ready advert is bad and wrong and creates unrealistic images and expectations of women, then you should do the same for things like this. But you don't. On the opposite side, if you say things like the Beachbody Ready advert shouldn't matter to anyone, you know, it's not doing you down or anything, it's just an advertisement, doesn't matter, your feelings don't matter, then you need to be consistent and you need to ignore things like this. Right, let's analyse the advert. Before I really get going, I should point out that in this analysis I'm trying to anticipate and read through the lenses that other people have. My opinion will come at the end. Bullying. Well, that didn't take long, but then the first opening shot of anything is quite important. Think of how the opening shot of Star Wars, you know, really sets up your expectations for the whole film. And I'm sure to most people watching this, seeing an older black man codes for, oh, this is inclusive, this is open, this is for everyone. But for a lot of people, after many years of being beaten on and seeing so much in the way of woke redesigns and so on, opening with a racial minority is not a positive thing, or any other minority, is not necessarily a positive thing, not because they're racist, but because it's a red flag for the kind of political and social comment and thrust of what is going to come next. So for a lot of people who aren't racist, who aren't prejudiced against black people, whatever, but are prejudiced against being preached at, this is an immediate red flag that immediately puts their hackles up. It's unfair, it's wrong, it's not racist, but it's still wrong, but this is how people will tend to read a move like this when you start Captain Planeting things right from the get-go. It's unfortunate, but this is a problem created by the people who claim to be fighting this kind of thing. But there you go.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get?
So we get a montage of a fairly diverse, rapidly changing group of men standing in front of mirrors, looking pensive. And at least from what I remember, the morning shave is a time often for self-reflection, both literally and metaphorically. And behind that we get all these sound bites of all these terrible things about men. And the implication is, I think, that men are thinking about what it is to be a man, and in some ways feeling put upon and beat down. Rather than pushing against that or giving something positive per se, as we're going to see, Gillette has decided to pile on with that. And it's a fairly negative message that I don't think it was their intention. So they're kind of establishing the background of the social zeitgeist around men. You're bad and wrong, there were all these scandals and horrible things, you know, and obviously it's upsetting.
Is it? We can't hide from it.
Right, so they bust through their old advertising, which is a bit on the nose so far as symbolism goes, and they're talking about bullying. Nobody likes bullying, nobody wants bullying to continue, but it does get concerning when they move over into talking about social media, how there is no escape from this stuff, because this is the justification. Won't somebody think of the children behind a lot of moves to try and censor and control and sanitize the internet, which might be good for kids? Jury's still out, evidence largely says no, but isn't good for society as a whole to live in a entirely constructed monoculture sent down from anyone, be it government or activists or woke corporations. But the symbolism is certainly there, that this is something inescapable and that Gillette is trying to break free of their legacy in some way.
Harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
I don't think this little sub-segment really works at all. I think what they're trying to say is that this has gone on for a long time, that this is established, and more worryingly towards the end of it saying that you can't just say it's a joke, you can't laugh at it, people aren't allowed to have sexy fun times. It just doesn't really seem to work, it doesn't seem to land, it doesn't seem to hit. And what a lot of people are going to read from this is that these motherfuckers are going to come in and they're going to spoil comedy, they're going to go back through time and try and censor things, and they have no concept of the progress that has been made. What is the point of looking to the past in this case? We don't live in the past, we live in the now. And the butt of the joke in the comedy cases, in the case of the cartoon, in the case of the apparently made up sitcom, the butt of the joke is the lecherous person, the inappropriate person. You know, they're not the hero or the example to be held up, they're something to be ridiculed and laughed at. So this whole section doesn't really land to me. I think I know what they were trying to say, I think I know how it's going to be received by a lot of men, but I think the whole segment is misconceived.
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Yeah, it's obviously referencing mansplaining, which is a sexist term that talks about an entire gender in broad brushstrokes and claims that any time a man explains anything to a woman, they're mansplaining. I know it wasn't originally intended to be that, but that's what it now is. Yeah, a woman is never allowed to be wrong, you're never allowed to point it out, you're never allowed to rephrase what they've said to help communicate it better, you're not allowed to lend your authority to something a woman has said to back her up, you're not allowed to help, it's all seen as patronising, which is the word, whether it's a man or a woman doing it. So the negative result of this has actually been detrimental to women, along with a lot of other things that have happened, in that men are increasingly less likely to want to help mentor women. The atmosphere is too toxic, too dangerous in the perception of many to be able to, because all it takes is for someone to say something, to tweet something that you may not even have done, and your career and your reputation are very likely kaput. Believe women is a very dangerous place to be. And then when it comes to the excuses part, that boys will be boys, well, roughhousing isn't bullying, isn't bad for anyone. It's a part of growing up and being a boy, and children are in many ways anti-fragile. You know, you don't want abuse or whatever to happen, but you want them to test boundaries, to stretch out, try different things, take risks for themselves, and learn. And if you coddle too far, that's as bad in its own way as allowing them to be abused. And we do seem to have coddled people too much. So there has to be some nuanced middle ground where we protect people, where we don't make excuses for bullying and so on, but we allow kids a degree of freedom to learn how much force is too much, what is bullying, and so on, ways to cope with the adversities that life throws at them. And this is how a lot of people are going to read this, in that, you know, you want to wrap people in bubble wrap. You want to protect them, and that anything that they do as men to try and help or to watch over but allow certain amounts of bad things to happen, that's no longer acceptable.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back.
Not all change is progress. Not all change is moving forward. Sometimes changes happen for the worse, and you do have to go back. You do have to unwind things to get to a place that had more progress, that was more progressive, that was freer and more liberal than where we found ourselves. And I think that is the situation in which we find ourselves now. Certain things have gone too far and have become illiberal, counterproductive, anti-progressive, regressive. Anna Kasparian was probably the wrong choice to put there, because like the opening shot not coding what you think it does necessarily to certain aspects of your audience, throwing Anna Kasparian up there is going to be profoundly negative for a lot of people. I used to watch the Young Turks a lot, I still watch occasionally, but they have largely gone insane over the last few years and have spun off to a degree of extremity where I can't follow, despite being a fairly extreme leftist myself. But throwing her up there, I mean, you might as well have put a portrait of Stalin up in the minds of many people. And that's, if people weren't already turned off, that is the point at which they're going to stop listening to you. It does present the kind of relentless negativity that every man, I think, is experiencing at this point. But then the response to it is not a productive or useful response.
Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie. Come on.
To say the right thing.
This is where some of that hypocrisy, some of that cognitive dissonance comes in. Earlier in the advertisement, we saw a man laying his hand on the shoulder of a woman and explaining things for her, lending his authority to her, helping her, if you want to put a positive spin on it. Here, we see a demand that men do step in and stand up for women, rather than backing off and letting them fight their own battles and look after themselves. Yet there's an inherent contradiction between those 2 points that cannot be escaped. Do you want men to stand up and help women, or is that patronizing and wrong, and women should, be free to stand up for themselves? Should you white knight? And that is a stereotypical masculine trait that could be called toxic. The nice guys, the guys who do stand up for women and so on, do, it seems, quite often turn out to be creeps. So there's a problem there. Plus, it's a recipe for getting shot, stabbed, or beaten up. And if there's no gratitude, if there is no reward for being a good man, then people are more reluctant to stand up and be that. I mean, we'll take it back to what I said earlier about not all progress being positive. This change that has happened is that what constitutes bad male behavior, the bar has dropped through the floor. Holding a door open for someone, anything can be taken in a bad way. And also, things that we take for granted as universal human rights, such as the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, have been eroded or overturned to such a degree that many men live in fear, particularly of the power wielded by institutions in this way, of just saying or doing the wrong thing. And so many of them are disengaging from women, from society, and it's hard to blame them for that. And yet we're still told that it's a patriarchy, that men have all the institutional power and so on. I think not, baby puppy.
to act the right way.
Bro, not cool, not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Noticing a pretty girl and maybe approaching her to try and get her number. Like I said, low bar. And that's how people are going to read it. What you're saying, I can't notice a pretty girl who's obviously, you know, taken care with her appearance and so on. I can't be attracted to her and maybe want to ask for her phone number or whatever else. Yeah, these are minor social interactions, everyday interactions, which are being reframed and repainted as necessarily sinister.
Yo, men, we're
and small.
I am strong.
Holding up your kid, telling them that they're great, that they're good, you know, being a good father, these are good things. But it's a little girl in an advert targeted at men and telling men they need to be better and to pass on that being better, whatever that being better might be. Would it have hurt it so much to have a little boy there to show a man being a father to another boy and passing down positive behavior? This is how a lot of men are going to read this, as men should be subservient to and serve women. It's their duty to hold women up. It's their duty to self-sacrifice. But this is the very same kind of traditional toxic masculinity, as people like to say, just given a very slightly different spin.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Conflating playful roughhousing with, you know, actual horrible physical bullying is a bit of an odd move, a bit peculiar perhaps, but the end part of the advert is actually fairly good. After relentlessly pounding home the same negative images about men, the same negative things about men over and over again, it tries to end on a positive note, but it ends sourly because of what has come before. What differentiates this from adverts that women talk about, complain about, and so on, is that this attacks masculinity itself in a cynical and exploitative way. It attacks men as men for being men. The adverts that women talk about don't attack women for being women. They do perhaps undermine women's confidence by telling them you should be thin, you should be beautiful, you should be whatever else, but they don't attack them for being women. Same way you don't get adverts attacking black people for being black, or Asians for being Asian. You know, you may have had adverts in the past that played off negative stereotypes and so on, but they didn't attack their core identity, their core physical being, who and what they are, but aspects of them. And that, I think, is a big part of the reason why this has been so negatively reacted to. Okay, what's my opinion on the whole thing? I think the advert itself isn't as bad as the people doing it down are saying, and isn't as good as the people that are boosting it up are saying. It's an advert. Gillette do not care about any of this. This is to sell you razors. And what's interesting to me is that we live in a time of beards. Having a beard has been in style for a considerable amount of time now, which means less shaving, which means less razors. And it's particularly in amongst the kind of hipster woke crowd that elaborate, stupid looking moustaches, beards and so on are especially popular. So I think this is purely a cynical marketing ploy by them to try and equate clean shaven with wokeness, to try and expand their market. And they know that, you know, most men are creatures of habit and won't change their razor just because they object to a particular advert and so on. A boycott is not going to get any steam. So regarding the advert itself, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that good. I think it's purely cynical marketing, and that's really an end to it. What I've been most interested in is the reaction to it, and the reaction to the reaction to it. These are the aspects that interest me, the culture war that interests me. So in my analysis, I tried as best I could to view it through the eyes of Gillette, through the woke crowd, and through the people who are reacting negatively to it. You know, my interpretation is, it's an advert, but the reactions are where it's interesting, and the contradictions between the reactions to the reactions when it comes to this or Beachbody Ready or similar. I think this is a missed opportunity for a genuinely positive message. What I would have liked to have seen was maybe juxtaposing, you know, heroic, genuinely masculine images of men being like firefighters and soldiers and police, and less conventional things, teachers, especially primary school teachers, or, you know, carers at home for kids, you know, homemakers, male homemakers, that kind of thing. I'd like to have seen that kind of imagery juxtaposed with all these negative things. I think that could have been a more positive advert to reinforce the positive sides of masculinity. But this contradiction, like I say, it's found on both sides here. The very same people who defended things like the Beachbody Ready advert, saying, oh, it's just an advert, it doesn't mean that much, you know, grow up, you know, free speech, these things shouldn't be banned, it's not a problem, are the same people bleating about this advert. And on the other side, the people who are saying, oh, you know, this advertisement, the representation of women in advertising is so important, representation is so important, oh, it's creating unrealistic expectations for young girls, and all the rest of it, are defending this. And there is a hypocrisy in that, and there's also a massive hypocrisy in, on the one hand, telling men, oh, you need to open up more, you need to express your feelings, and then when they get upset at this, not like that. That's the message. You're only allowed to be upset and to cry about the things we tell you you're allowed to be upset and to cry about. We don't actually care about your feelings, we just want you to express them more about certain things in a way that we give you license to do. That's a hard thing to accept. If you're telling me one thing but then you act in exactly the opposite way, I don't think anyone can be blamed for being at least confused or perhaps angry. And I think that anger cuts to the quick of it. See, male emotion, when expressed, is generally reacted to in one of two ways, and obviously I'm speaking in a broad generalization, okay? When a man expresses emotion, it is either seen as weakness and reacted to with disgust, or it is seen as dangerous and reacted to with fear. You can't claim that you want men to express their feelings and then react in that way to it. And a lot of the responses and so on are tied into this concept of toxic masculinity. Unfortunately, that term has been horrendously misused and when it's communicated, is read as you have a problem with men, you are misandrist. It's not how it was originally intended, but that's how it's been used. And all of the things that are tagged as toxic masculinity also have positive sides. Stoicism in and of itself isn't bad. Being able to suppress your feelings, have some amount of objectivity and distance to hold it together in an emergency to get something done, these are all positives. It's only when it's taken to an extreme that that's bad. Competition, you know, is a driver, an engine of change and improvement. It's only when it's taken to an extreme, to a pathological extreme, that it actually becomes toxic. And so it goes for all the rest of these things that are called toxic masculinity. It's a confused, cynical ploy, but most of the people reacting to it, or reacting to the reactions to it, are hypocrites. And that's what fuels the fire, I think. Have a principle, have a standard, stick to it, apply it as universally as possible. And Gillette's just trying to sell you razors. Zang.